So let's talk about 8 things that you want to know and be prepared for and expect if you're going in for a medical induction for your labor. I'm Jasmine from the Birth Zone. We have a website, thebirthzone.com, where you can always go for more information or contact information for us. So let's get into it. These are some things that you want to know if you're going to have a medical induction. Medical induction has become super, super common. So first thing I want you to know is that scheduled date and time may change. Expect that can be fluid because often it just depends on the flow of patients that they have at a hospital. And sometimes they will call you shortly before you're expecting to actually go in for your appointment. And they're going to say, oh, actually, let's push that back 4 hours or 8 hours or another day or two until we have more opening for you. So it's just important to know because it can really be a bummer, frankly, if you're like expecting to go in for your induction on a certain date. And especially if you're kind of a type A person or high anxiety and you've really developed a whole plan around that date and time, and then it all of a sudden changes at the last minute and you weren't expecting that. It can also change for medical reasons. So, of course, if you go into labor before your scheduled induction, or your water breaks, or you go into the doctor's appointment and they say, actually, I think we're going to send you over to the hospital now for that induction. So those things can happen as well. All right. Second thing that I want you to know if you're having an induction is that it's usually going to start at night. So this is, again, in that case where it really is just scheduled. They often have you come in the evening, sometime around 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, something like that. It takes a couple of hours to even just get you checked in and kind of get some baseline readings on you and the baby before they ever even start anything for your induction. The reason they often do it at night is because their goal with that is to have you have the baby sometime by 5 o'clock or so the next day, kind of during business hours when the hospital is more staffed and the doctor's around, so they don't have to miss as much sleep. Okay, so that's that second thing. The third thing that I want you to expect is that they usually start the whole process by ripening your cervix. So they don't like just jump into contractions and labor immediately when you get to the hospital. When you get there, like I said, it's going to be a couple of hours of checking in. They're going to feel your cervix, figure out where that's at the baseline. And then what they're going to do from there is create a way for ripening your cervix. So your cervix, think of it almost like a piece of fruit, like a peach. A peach that's underripe is pretty hard. And then as it gets ripe and overripe, it gets like super soft. So the same thing happens with your cervix. It starts out feeling kind of like the tip of your nose. And then as you get closer and closer to labor, it feels more like your earlobe, real soft and squishy, okay? It also starts dilating and effacing a little bit. So we know that the more ripe and ready your cervix is, the better it will sort of take to labor and induction, the better it's going to respond to the Pitocin medication they're going to give you later on. So that whole first night might just be prepping your cervix. And they have a couple different ways they do that. One really popular way these days is with a catheter. So instead of putting that catheter into your bladder, they put it up into your cervix. Because where you pee is your urethra and your vagina goes to your cervix. Those are 2 different holes that women have, okay? And so they put that catheter up into your cervix and they inflate a little balloon at the end, and that puts some pressure on your cervix and starts manually opening it. The other way that they try usually is with some kind of medication. So they can give you that medication either by inserting it vaginally and putting it up right next to your cervix, or by having you ingest it orally. So the whole first night is typically one of those kinds of methods or some combination of those methods, okay? And the fourth thing that I want you to know is that you need to sleep as much as you can that first night, or even if it's during the day. It's going to be hard to sleep because you're going to be excited about having your baby. You're going to be uncomfortable because you're in a hospital bed and staff keeps coming in and out and wanting to take your vitals and all of this. But the more you can sleep in the beginning, the better. This is going to be a long process ahead of you. You need your sleep while you can get it. Same goes for your partner. So they need to lay down and rest as well. And in fact, if this is your first baby and things are going slowly and we haven't started Pitocin yet, you may even want to send your partner home to sleep so they can get some good rest. I know that's not fair because you're the one who has to do all the hard work. So like, why does your partner get better rest? But you are going to want their help as much as possible, especially once your baby is born. So the more rested they can be, the better they can help you. So get as much sleep as you can that first night. be prepared for this to be a long journey, and you're going to need that rest. Okay. So speaking of that, tip number 5 is don't start counting hours of this induction until they start your Pitocin, okay? So all that stuff that they're doing ahead of time to get your cervix ripe and ready with the medication or the balloon, it might be really uncomfortable. You might have some contractions. You might even be in pain. But until you're really having contractions every 2 to 3 minutes, you're not in labor yet. And if you get to the hospital at 7 p.m. and you start like counting those hours starting at 7 p.m., you may not even start that Pitocin and start having real strong contractions until 7 a.m. And now all of a sudden you just feel like your labor is taking forever at 7 a.m. because you've already been there for 12 hours, when really it's just getting started. So save yourself a lot of hassle, a lot of drama, set yourself up with expectations that this is going to be a long haul, and those beginning hours really don't count. That's not labor yet, okay? And then number 6, along those same lines, expect this to take you a good 24 to 30 hours. My induction was 51 hours. I talked to somebody last night whose induction was 40 hours. That's not all that uncommon either. So the whole thing said and done is going to be probably at least 24 to 30 hours. Hopefully it goes faster than that. That would be great. And usually it goes a bit faster than that if you've had a baby before, but if this is your first, a good 24 hours is a good rule of thumb. So just kind of keep your expectations in check. Make sure that your partner also shares that expectation, because often it's the dads who really have no clue when we get there, and they're like thinking, okay, so great, what time are we having the baby? In like 6 hours? And it's like, no, we've got a long time to go here. Okay, save your energy, rest, sleep, watch movies, watch comedy, stand-up comedy, like whatever helps you pass the time so that it seems hopefully like it's going faster than it is. Okay. Number 7, what to expect. Expect that your doctor or midwife will offer to break your waters. The main reason they like to do this is because your baby's kind of floating in your uterus in like a water balloon sort of thing. And so they're kind of floating in there. And if we pop that balloon, then the baby's head can drop down a little bit in your pelvis and put some extra pressure on your cervix. And sometimes with that extra pressure on your cervix, your labor will pick up and go a little bit more speedily, and you'll start dilating more rapidly. I say sometimes because it doesn't always go that way. A lot of times they break your water and it continues to take what seems like forever. So don't expect it to be some magic bullet. And you always have the right to say no to that. You certainly don't have to do it if you don't want to, but just expect that at some point during this whole process, they're going to come in and offer to do that for you. Okay. And oh my gosh, I got to get my notes back open again. Number 8 of what to expect is that you might want an epidural with an induction. Inductions, we already talked about how they're really long, and even from the beginning, it can be uncomfortable. And then especially once Pitocin starts, you can be really in a lot of pain. We're kind of forcing your body to do something it wasn't ready to do already. And we're kind of going a little bit against nature. So it makes sense that's going to cause even more pain than labor normally might be. A lot of the work that your body would normally do to get ready for labor happens without you even realizing it when we're waiting for labor to start naturally on its own. So, if we were waiting for labor to start on its own, you might start noticing you're having contractions that lead then into labor, but you may have already been having contractions for days or even weeks before that you didn't notice or feel. And often with an induction, your body hasn't had a chance to do all of that sort of prep work already. That's part of why inductions take a long time as well. But it's also part of why it's painful, because that Pitocin gets started coming through your IV, and all of a sudden those kind of prep contractions that before you wouldn't have felt, you're feeling them now in an induction. And it gets long and tiring and hard, and you start to doubt yourself. You start to question whether or not this is really going to work. And most of the time it does work beautifully, but it feels like something's off and something's wrong. And so that's why we often see kind of Pitocin and epidurals go hand in hand, that many times people who have an induction end up wanting to get that epidural because they get tired and they're in a lot of pain. So there's nothing wrong with that if you choose to get it. Something to think about ahead of time, especially if you had your mindset on doing this without an epidural and you know you're going in for an induction. Just kind of think through how you feel about that. And if you're still really committed to doing it without the epidural, make sure that you have a game plan in place of really a lot of tools and tips and tricks to get yourself there, because it's harder to do without that induction or without that epidural. Sorry. Blah. But I will just say, as a doula, I have supported a whole lot of people who have managed to do an induction without an epidural if that was their goal. So it's definitely possible, but I just like to be realistic and let people know kind of what they're up against. So those are my 8 tips. I hope that was helpful. Come follow us, leave reviews if you're able to, please. Come check out our services at thebirthzone.com. If you want some an interactive space to be with us, look up our group on Facebook. We have a page as well, but the group is where you can interact and ask questions and get into more dialogue with people. So, and it's all under the name The Birth Zone. So if you just look up The Birth Zone group on Facebook, you're going to find us there. All right. Happy birthing, everybody.